Strive presents. Oh, got to get ready.
Laptop. Plant. That looks nice there.
Ooh, cookies, yum.
Notebook.
Microphone, webcam, and coffee, of course. A video podcast where deaf, hard of hearing, and disabled creatives and their allies chat about experiences, best practice, and the future of the arts. The Green Room.
Hello and welcome to The Green Room, a weekly video podcast brought to you by Strive Collective, a collaboration between Hot Coals Productions and the DH Ensemble. My name is Clare-Louise English and I am one half of Hot Coals Productions. So, over 12 weeks, we are going to be chatting with some of the most exciting deaf, disabled and neurodiverse talent in the arts industry and their industry allies, both here in the UK and internationally. We're going to be celebrating best practice, we're going to be spotlighting unsung heroes and hopefully inspiring you guys out there to keep access and diversity front and centre in the next coming months and years to come. So we're publishing a new video podcast every Thursday evening at 7:30. And you can find details of where to get hold of that on our website, on YouTube, and of course on all our usual social media channels. We would very much encourage you to join the conversation. So if you are watching on YouTube on a Thursday night, kind of live, welcome, thank you. Please drop us a comment in the comment box. Obviously hit the like button and please subscribe as well. Or you can catch up with the conversation at any time on demand, and you can join in the conversation at any point by using the hashtag #thegreenroom_UK on all the usual social media. So that's the formal bit. I'm going to now do some introductions because we have a few people here today. So as I said, my name's Clare-Louise. I am a white woman with mid-length red hair that is straight today. And you find me in my lounge. I have a plant over my left shoulder. And in the distance, not that far, is my funky wallpaper. Caveat, there is a dog hiding under that pile of blankets on the sofa. So there's a chance you might join in the conversation at some point. Providing the access today, I have Anna Kitson. She is my interpreter for the day. So Anna, would you like to say hello?
Hello, my name is Anna. My sign name is this. So you're basically pushing up your sleeves one arm at a time from the wrist to the elbow. I'm a white woman with brown hair just below the shoulders. I'm wearing a dark grey top, and behind me is a bright green screen to acknowledge where we are today.
Thank you, Anna. On brief, as always. Thank you. And I have the absolute pleasure today of interviewing the awesome casting director that is Polly Jerrold. Would you like to say hello to everyone, Polly?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name's Polly Jerrold. I am very pleased to be here today. I am a white woman with ginger hair, sort of long bob, I guess you'd call it. I have long, dangly gold earrings and a pink high neck jumper on that I didn't realise was quite so vibrant and bright when I bought it, but I'm going with it. My background is a light pink wall, and over my right shoulder is a kind of sort of wall hanging thing, also pink. Clearly a theme today. Didn't realise it, but there we go. I have Tracey, who will be interpreting what I say into VSL. Tracey, would you like to give an audio description of yourself?
Hello, my name is Tracey, and my sign name is Tracey, which looks like you're grabbing your wrist and pulling away. I'm wearing a green blouse with a black jumper with short sleeves, and I'm a white woman with dark brownish hair in a sort of pixie cut, and in my background is a blue screen, as most interpreters are working with screens at the moment.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, welcome to my self-tape nightmare. I don't have a well-lit blank wall at all in my flat. But you're welcome into my lounge today. So, Polly, thank you for joining us. This is very exciting.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me along.
So let's start. For anyone who doesn't know, give us a little overview of what a casting director does, what your role is in the industry, and we're talking specifically today in theatre.
Sure, yeah. So a casting director works alongside, is part of the creative team on a production, and works alongside the director and in some cases writer if it's a new piece of writing, and musical director if it's a musical or a piece with music in it, choreographer. So works with the whole creative team to piece together a company for a show. Really, the process starts by reading the script, if there is one. Obviously, some things are devised, and we tend to find that in sort of through workshops. But if there is a script, we will read that. And the director and I will talk about their interpretation, their ideas thus far. And really, you know, that is something that also you can challenge as a casting director, that you're there to kind of, you know, bring new ideas, bring provocations, you know, potentially look to bring a new idea that perhaps the director hasn't thought of yet. And then once you kind of got all of that information in terms of kind of who you're looking for, you put that out to agents, often via a breakdown. So a breakdown of characters, who's in the play, like what age they are, if there's a specific ethnicity. And obviously specificity is important where it is important, but also, you know, you try to have, be as open-minded and as flexible as to kind of, you know, in terms of new interpretations that you might not yet have thought of as well, because there is an element that comes out of the casting process when you're meeting with people that may well inform where you go with a character. Mm-hmm. So it's keeping that open mind in the early stages of a casting process. And then we will invite people in for audition. So we'll send scripts out to actors for them to have a read of. Sometimes you make straight offers as well. So you'll go straight to agents with a face. So it might be that, you know, the director has perhaps worked with somebody before who they're really, really keen to work with on this particular project, or indeed has already had that conversation. Sometimes the casting director, you're brought on and there's already an actor attached. So yes, there may well be some straight offers, so in which case you're sending dates and schedules and money and all that sort of thing over to agents. But otherwise, you're inviting people in for auditions. And you put together a day or several days of meetings in which actors come into the room, and you tend to, in theatre, we don't tend to expect people to kind of learn scripts off by heart, because we like to kind of be able to have that sort of fluidity and flexibility with the script. You know, sometimes you can get a bit stuck, and ordinarily directors will give notes and you'll kind of do the scene again. As the casting director, you can be the person who reads in with the person in the room as well, or you might have somebody who you've brought in, often an actor, to kind of read in with the other actor who's auditioning. So we'll do the whole audition process. And as I say, often you're kind of informed by who your meetings were, so lots and lots and lots of conversation about where we might go with the character. And indeed, you're thinking always about the company that you're putting together in its entirety as well. So you're thinking, you know, this person feels like they'd match really nicely with that person for whatever reason. Or I often think of it as kind of like finding the core of a company. And really sometimes you can't necessarily put into words what exactly it is that kind of you feel is connecting people or bringing people into that kind of core, but there just sometimes is something. So then once you've worked out who it is that you'd like to offer to, you put those offers in, and then you wait and you bite your nails and you wait for them to get some snazzy TV drama and not want to work with you. So it's interesting because there's always this kind of like shift of sort of, I mean, you know, it's not a great way of putting it, but kind of like, I suppose, a power play. Like it's, you know, it's yes, we're the ones who invite you into the room, but then we're the ones who are kind of waiting eagerly and hoping that you want to be, you know, in our show. So it should be a collaborative process in that sense as well. It should be us all kind of meeting each other and talking and seeing whether there's chemistry there between director and creative team and that actor. And indeed, sometimes you might have recalls where you bring a couple of actors in together, and then putting the offers out there, waiting, and then you finally have your company and organize contracts and do the negotiations, and that's that. And a key thing as part of being a casting director is, of course, constantly looking to expand your knowledge base. So you're going to all the drama school showcases, go and see kind of youth theatre groups, and, you know, going all around the country to see theatre productions, both kind of smaller, bespoke, kind of independent, fringe stuff, and the big shows, telly as well, and just keeping abreast of where people are up to, and films, obviously, where people are up to in their career.
I was going to say, you're kind of like you're a bit of a collector of actors, aren't you, casting directors?
Yeah, certainly. And I think you do need to have a good memory, therefore you kind of need to you kind of need to you need to find ways in which you can bank that information. I know I know some people kind of have physical lists that they keep adding to and stuff, whereas some of us just keep it in there and somehow it stays. You don't move.
It's not like a one in, one out scenario where you've got a sort of shelf of how many you can fit.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. That was a really great kind of overview, and really useful. Thank you. So we're going to jump now. We're going to jump to 2017, because that is when we first met, when you brought me in to audition for Tribes. So Tribes, obviously, for those who don't know, had two deaf characters in, one of which was certainly BSL signer. So tell us a little bit about that show and what that process was like, sort of specifically looking for deaf actors in the casting.
Yeah, so as you say, Claire, there are two characters in that piece, Sylvia and Billy, and Billy has been deaf since birth, and Sylvia is going deaf. It isn't 100% sort of prescriptive in the script as to where exactly she's up to, but certainly by the end of the play, and she's certainly kind of quite far into that sort of process. That's a bad way of putting it, but you know what I mean.
Losing her hearing, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So we always knew, so in terms of the Billy character, we always knew that we were looking for a deaf actor for that, and so that was a case of looking to sort of definitely theatre and other deaf and hearing ensemble, and putting that out there to kind of see who might be suitable for that role. There were a couple of people that we already knew of to go to, and I went to the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland and checked in with them, because they have a BA Hons in performance with BSL and English. And indeed, that's where our actor Kieran Stewart came from. So, and then the other character, Sylvia, historically hadn't actually been played by a deaf actress, but it was one of the first conversations that we had, and we felt that it was really important to try and achieve that authenticity and to see deaf actresses for that role. So that's exactly what we did. We also, just as I said before, considering the company, you know, and the sort of culture of the rehearsal room and what that was going to be, considering it was a piece that had two deaf actors in it, or two deaf characters in it, we also thought about trying to find within the company anybody else who might be a BSL user. So we also saw for the other parts, in particular for the brother, there are a few people that we saw who were BSL users. What that also meant that we did was that we saw for the role of Sylvia, so for the deaf character, we saw some hearing actresses who were either fluent in BSL or were native BSL. So were either child of deaf adults or had that in their their sibling, or indeed, as I say, were kind of level 6 fluent. And that was really interesting because I think in hindsight that was a bit misguided. I think that we came at it, as I say, with a view to kind of like, how can we make sure that maybe, you know, I knew that, you know, when you are the only deaf actor in a company, that can feel really isolating. So that's why we kind of looked to kind of, you know, see whether there was anybody else who kind of who was either fluent in BSL or native. So that's kind of where we came to on that. But I think, as I say, retrospectively, I don't think that was particularly responsible, because the actresses that we went to were actually closer to that conversation about really that being quite inappropriate, because they were part of the sort of deaf community. So they were kind of closer to it than actually hearing actors who maybe weren't familiar with this conversation about that being quite inappropriate. So I felt like that was irresponsible of us, of putting them in a potentially quite awkward situation. But you know, some of those actresses said categorically, no, I'm not coming in. For the others who came in, clearly they were not massively comfortable with it, but it was all part of the conversation, and it felt really healthy to be having that conversation. And you learn from your errors, don't you? And I mean, ultimately, I think, you know, like with every casting process, if the people that you've met in the first stages of casting, you don't feel are right for the piece, or you don't feel kind of best suited to the role, then you go again. But we met with a number of actresses, and we're really excited by who we met with, and we ended up with Emily Howlett, who was absolutely the right person for the job. And that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve, isn't it? It's like, if the person comes in and they're the right person for the job, then that's who gets cast, and that's ultimately what happened. So it felt really positive.
Yeah, and I mean, that is such a big conversation at the moment, isn't it? And it's such an important conversation to be having around, as you said, authenticity of casting, and making sure the right person gets the role and has the sensitivity and has, you know, in particular, I mean, we just released our first interview yesterday, and Alan actually was talking in that about, you know, hearing actors playing signing roles, playing signing characters that really had no background of signing, and you just can't, you know, he uses the example of, well, if you got an English person to play a Spanish person and asked them to speak Spanish, and then showed it to some Spanish people and they couldn't understand the Spanish because it was so bad, you know, that was the kind of thing that was happening.
Yeah.
So it is but it's also really interesting that you opened it up to hearing people who could sign and were sort of coders, or part of coders being children of deaf adults, so sort of part of that deaf community, and it's interesting that they were the ones that went, oh no, we shouldn't go for those roles.
Yeah,
it's kind of an interesting conversation. But
yeah, and I think there's two aspects to that conversation as well, or kind of two key aspects. I think, like as you're saying, Claire, there's the authenticity and the conversation in that. And I think, yeah, if I have a bit of experience in terms of language learning, and yeah, it doesn't take you long to realize that kind of like, to say that, I mean, even when you say you're kind of, I've got to, this level with it or whatever, it culturally, there's so much that isn't there as well. So there's a lot in that. But I think also we're talking about opportunity as well, and we're talking about opportunity at the moment. I think, yes, as actors, you should be transformative, you should be able to transform, but I think that until we reach more of a level playing field, it just felt really wrong to not see, sort of, just from a, I think there's a moral standpoint in there as well, that in terms of like, this is a deaf character, and let's make sure therefore that we see deaf actresses for that deaf character, even if it's like we don't decide that exclusively we're going to do that, but we do that first of all, we give them the opportunity first of all, and then we see where we're up to. And I just think so. I think it's kind of authenticity and it's opportunity.
100%. I mean, there's so much to talk about in just that one section that you've mentioned, but I'm just going to pick up on the Spotlight now has added in that you can have you can say what level BSL you were in, because it used to be that you could just say, oh, I've got BSL, British Sign Language, and that was a problem. For me, I was like, is this the new horse riding? Everyone's saying yes, I can do that, but then you get them into the space and they actually can't. So were those levels helpful, and is there enough awareness, you think, amongst casting directors as to what those levels mean?
In short, in answer to your second question, no, I don't think there is enough awareness, and I include
Claire, sorry, I missed the end of the question. I missed the actual question. I got as far as the horse riding.
I was just doing too much I distracted you with a joke, sorry.
Distracted me with a joke. It was really a joke. I was like, horse riding?
For anyone that doesn't know the horse riding joke, there was a time in acting, in the acting world, where everybody just felt it was so important that they had horse riding on their skills, so they ticked it, and then they would get these jobs and they'd arrive on set and be given a horse to ride, and they'd be like, oh, and it could sort of become like, oh, I've learnt a bit of signing, I'll tick that box, and then people couldn't really sign with any proficiency. And so Spotlight added in the levels, because you can take exams in BSL and gain certain levels. So Spotlight have now added that in. And the question that I asked Polly was, was that useful when those levels were added? And is there enough awareness amongst the casting profession as to what those levels actually mean?
Thank you.
So yes, I think there could be a lot more awareness of what those levels mean and where exactly. If it's 1, 2, 3, and then 6, isn't it?
Yeah, and there is a sort of weird level 4 in the middle that I've done, but I don't think there's sort of. I think there is an exam in one of the boards, but not the other. But it's sort of like a stepping stone, because there is quite a big jump from level 3 to level 6, and then after that you're into training to be an interpreter after that.
Right. Yeah. I'm still hobbling along in level 1, so
everyone starts somewhere.
Say what?
Everyone starts somewhere.
True. So I think yes, there can be more awareness for sure, and I think this is all part of the kind of conversations that we need to be having and the kind of learning that we need to be looking to gain. Yes, I think it's a good thing. I do think it's a good thing, because as you say, Claire, you have people coming into the audition room, and whilst I am clearly not a BSL consultant, you can, you know, you're kind of looking, going, okay, it really feels like you are very, very beginner here, and yeah, and so it's always useful to know kind of where people are up to, and it goes, you know, same with sort of musical instruments as well, kind of what grade have you taken. But you know, equally, it's sort of until that person actually is in the room and is playing their grade 5 saxophone, or is showing you, you know, or is actually kind of, you know, performing with BSL, then you don't know exactly where kind of somebody's, or how they're handling that. And that's why it's so important as well to have BSL consultants, to tell us where that person is up to tell us as casting directors, and as we know, yeah, not to be confused with a interpreter who is there to facilitate the conversation. The BSL consultant is a deaf person who will sort of judge and yeah, where that actor is up to with their BSL. So yes, certainly useful to have that there. But also, I think, just with, you know, with the knowledge that until that person's in the room and until you're kind of really working with that language, you don't necessarily know how good a handle they have of it.
Yeah, and another whole conversation to be had around BSL consultants, but maybe let's park that for a second, because I'd like to now jump backwards in time from Tribes to Ramps on the Moon. So Ramps on the Moon first set up in 2016, or certainly the first show was 2016, and you were brought on at that point. So let's talk about, just explain. Oh, I must just say as well, we've mentioned Royal Scottish and some other bits, and we'll make sure that we put links to these in the notes, folks, so you can look up things that we're talking about. Now I've lost my own train of thought. Oh yeah, so tell us about, just give us a little overview first of all of Ramps on the Moon Consortium and what that is for people that don't know.
Sure. So Ramps on the Moon, it's a consortium of 6 NPO, National Portfolio Organisations, theatres, 6 theatres, who are, they are the New Wolsey, Ipswich,
Leeds, no, sorry, Sheffield.
I'm just waiting for the finger spelling.
Oh, sorry.
No, I hadn't forgotten.
Like, has she gone blank?
God, there's like one. No, there's Birmingham Rep. There's Leeds Playhouse. There's Sheffield Theatres, Theatre Royal Stratford East, and Nottingham Playhouse. And Grey Eye is a strategic partner alongside those theatres. Yeah, really, it's looking at better representation of deaf and disabled artists and creatives, and normalising their presence both on and off stage. So in terms of the productions, there's one a year, and they're big productions. So they're big companies, normally of around 20 actors. We've never been specific with like a quota system. We have, but roughly we've always looked to have a kind of 50-50 split of deaf and disabled actors and hearing and non-disabled actors. And the productions tend to be well-known pieces of work, but kind of often kind of reimagined in some respects. There's been, so we've done The Government Inspector, and then the second year we did a musical, we did Tommy, and then we did Our Country's Good. And then the fourth production was Oliver Twist, which I know is a sore subject because you were in it and you haven't yet. Did you manage 1 week?
Yeah, we did open. We did the full rehearsals. We opened, I think we did more than, I think we did a couple of weeks. We certainly got past press night. Woo! And then COVID and the world just closed and we were all sent home. And we were just about to go off on the big tour. Because that's the other part of Ramps, isn't it? Each year, the show is hosted by a different one of those 6.
Yeah.
And then the show tours to the main houses of those 6.
It goes to the main houses and it spends 2 weeks in those houses. So in two weeks each, in each venue. So I was the casting director on the first 3 productions.
Yes. So when you first had that conversation, when they came to you, can tell us a bit about when you were when you joined, but when you first had those conversations, what was that like when they told you what they were hoping to achieve? Can you remember what you kind of were thinking in that moment? Did you realize you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was really excited. I was really excited to be involved, and I was really, really pleased to have been asked to be involved. I felt an enormous amount of responsibility. You do as a casting director anyway. You want to make sure that the environment in which you're bringing actors into, in terms of auditions, is going to be most conducive to getting the best work out of that person. So to then sort of consider that there are some people who have never felt like that was a particularly accessible space for them, or and in some respects it goes as far as say a particularly safe space, and one in which that they can really express themselves as an artist. To know that contingent of people are that you're looking to meet those people, I did feel an enormous responsibility to kind of not bodge it up in terms of not making sure that was an accessible space first and foremost, and then
and you had such a variety of access needs, because as we just said, they're always a big cast. So you were auditioning a full range of deaf and disabled people, presumably. That must have been overwhelming initially.
Yeah, I think it was constantly just trying to keep a lid on that and not feeling overwhelming, because I think also it's like, it's sort of anything that I was feeling, I think could very much, sort of fade into significance where, this kind of the kind of barriers that had been there for people. It was like, no, let's just get on with it, let's just do it, come on, let's focus. But in terms of the learning that came out of that, it was extraordinary. I think I'd certainly worked with deaf and disabled actors in the past, but not in any way on this kind of level, in terms of, as you say, the amount of access requirements for one casting process as well. And that, I think it just, even things like working with interpreters, knowing kind of where that person needs to sit, the kind of all the protocol that kind of goes with that as well, in terms of, not referring to the interpreter, keeping focused on the actor. It's Braille scripts, it's large font, it's coloured fonts, it's no PDFs, it's lip reading, things like that was we had one audition where a blind actress needed me to feed in lines behind her, stuff like that, what I just had never done before, and also didn't know that was how we were going to kind of hold this meeting. So that was amazing. And actually I think what was particularly amazing about that, in terms of how that then fed into work kind of later on for me, and kind of was what happened there in terms of that feeding in and that process. Just I then began to see how that could work in situations in which it wasn't about a blind actor. Actually, it was just an actor. I mean, there was one case where an actor had dyslexia, and that really worked for him. But also, I worked with a director who actually just really enjoyed working like that, who wanted me to feed in the lines because it liberated that actor from the script. And so it was really interesting, kind of, that initially was seen, you know, in terms of as an access requirement, but actually what we learn from these things is that these access requirements bring about a flexibility and bring about a creativity that we perhaps otherwise might not have discovered.
Yeah, 100%. This is you know, what Amy Leach always says, who was directed Oliver Twist, is that actually access is just like having more paints in your palette. It just gives you more tools, more toys to play with. It doesn't have to be seen as this thing that you have to do and you have to bolt it on. It can just offer you so much more creatively. You know, both on stage and, as you've just said, sort of in the run up to, through rehearsals, through auditions. So that's really good that you've kind of brought that point up. And how did, so then you did 3, as you said, 3 overall for Ramps on the Moon. Each one, again, big casts, full diversity. So did you notice that there were any things that you learnt through, that your casting process changed as you went through the 3 productions? What things did you take forwards?
Yeah, I mean, certainly all those things in terms of just, you know, just knowing how to sort of make the audition room the as I say, kind of the most sort of accessible and conducive to getting best work in terms of, you know, describing who's in the room, you know, for partially sighted or blind actors. It's and understanding things about BSL translation, you know, even small things like knowing to have a stand for the script. If you know, if yeah, well, for BSL users, but also maybe for somebody who is holding that script with one hand and that's the only option they have, and if they can put it on the stand, then it frees them up. And equally, you know, ensuring that you have somewhere for a wheelchair user to put their script. And it's these little things that obviously just make a huge difference, and also making sure that script is accessible in the first instance as well. And any audio they have, like with Tommy, making sure that kind of that's all of the material that it gets to people in time, that there's enough time to prep it, and that it is in accessible formats. So certainly, yeah, I mean, we took that learning from production to production. But I think, you know, like any new venture, there was an element of it like slightly flying by the seat of your pants a bit, kind of, you know, we were looking to do something that we felt really excited by, but you know, there it wasn't a perfect process, and I would say it hasn't, you know, it wasn't a perfect process for probably each of those 3. There's still stuff, there's still always stuff that I was discovering, and
but that's also you know, part of the joy of these things, and part of what we want to sort of bring across in the green room is being afraid of doing something or getting it wrong is not a reason not to do it. And actually, I mean, I think in the arts we're usually quite good at thinking, well, I don't know how to do that, but let's do it anyway, you know, let's just start. And I think that's a really important thing when we talk about access, and that, you know, you might not know the answers straight away, and that's okay. You can start the process, and you can ask the right people, and you can learn from your mistakes, and, you know, panic in that way.
And I think a key thing for me when I first started on Ramps was that I definitely felt like I should already know all of this, and I felt ashamed that I didn't. And I felt kind of awful that I that I didn't, and I kind of started thinking, gosh, how have I been contributing to this problem thus far? And I think that that there is a lot of that you take on, and that you feel really keenly. And what we need to make sure of is that, as you say, Claire, that doesn't prevent you from still trying, from still doing it. Know that you're going to make mistakes. Hope to God that you're not going to make an absolute clanger of a mistake. But even if you do, you know, you're going to learn from it. And make sure that you know, it's all part of having that conversation as well. It needs to feel like it's a joined up, shared, collaborative conversation, that, you know, some of us are coming to it going, I might get this a bit wrong, so I might need to ask and ask and ask and ask is the thing. Don't be afraid to ask. If you don't know, just ask. But I think, you know, coming to it thinking I'm trying to do something, and you know, I know, you know, and somebody else is like, I've never had what I've needed. We need to just talk about it. We need to come together and kind of share that discussion. We're all trying to achieve the same thing here, and yeah, we're gonna trip up along the way. And I think equally, you know, something that for me that I felt also needed to be shared was what a casting process is for that casting director as well. So, for example, certainly in the first Ramps production, I was in touch with a lot of deaf and disabled actors who represented themselves, so didn't have agents, and ordinarily what you're doing throughout a process is you try your best to keep in touch with the agent or with the actor to let them know where you're up to. But equally, a lot of the time you don't necessarily know exactly where you're up to, and one piece of casting might inform who you go with in another piece of casting, and you might have 2 or 3 people on hold. And I think that there was quite a pressure to kind of constantly give updates to actors who were used to just actually a lot of the time getting a straight offer as well, because a lot of the time those actors would have worked with specific companies where they would have known 6 months in advance that they were doing this project. And obviously, you know, you have to be, it's that judging it as well, that judging that kind of like how transparent you are, because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings and say, you know, your third choice, sorry, but you still really rate that actor and you'd be really excited to have them in the show. But like I say, it's all about the piecing together and the kind of matching. But so I think I felt certainly after that first production, I felt like we just needed to have more discourse about what is a casting process as well. What is it for me and what is it for you? And let's share that conversation. And really that's what I think is so important that we look to do.
Sorry, we should probably drop in and make sure that we add into the notes a casting directory, I suppose you would call it. Alongside Spotlight, there is also Profile now, which is run by Spotlight and the National, I believe, and that's a really good database for deaf and disabled actors. And I think you can be on that if you're not in Spotlight, I'm not sure, but also it links up to your Spotlight CV, and that has links to their CV and then videos of them doing monologues. So that's a really good resource, and we'll make sure we put a link in.
Yeah, certainly. And I know that DANC, the Disability Artist Networking Community, are doing some really, really great stuff where that's concerned as well.
Yeah. And I want to just, if we've got time to talk now about the kind of shift in the industry and in your casting process, where you've gone from casting a show that is sort of predominantly about putting deaf and disabled actors sort of front and center in big productions, to then another one I'm going to just sort of pick out of your CV was Peter Pan, where the wonderful deaf actress Rose who is now in EastEnders, very exciting, doing a fantastic job as Frankie, was in that production that wasn't necessarily setting out to be, this is about showcasing deaf and disabled actors. So how has that sort of changed in terms of a casting world? Do you feel now more able to offer up, more diversity and more options in the casting process?
Gosh, yeah, and I think there's that in that learning that I had in terms of with ramps, that really opened up, kind of who I knew, to be honest. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of kind of, I just met a lot of people who were really talented, and I was like, great, well, you can come in for all the things that I'm casting. That'd be lovely. So expanding my knowledge base was great, but certainly it then kind of empowered me to have more conversations with directors about perhaps reimagining or redefining a role. In some cases that wasn't sort of a necessary in terms of with Peter Pan. I mean, it's a fantastical thing, and we were very much kind of, we were looking for a really diverse cast because that's the most interesting company that you can put together. And I had met Rose. I'd seen her in a Definitely Theatre showcase, and then I'd met her for a few auditions. And then I just think she's wonderful. I think she's a wonderful actress. But yeah, certainly that knowledge, definitely, because a lot of the time you're having conversations with people who haven't yet had that contact with conversation around disability and don't know that many deaf and disabled actors. So if you can come to that conversation and you can say, don't panic. I know what it is to have this panic. Don't panic. I think I've got this one. Let me help you now. Let me guide you through it. Let me tell you what it is that I've learned and what it is that I know about this situation and how we might integrate BSL, for example. Let's talk. So it doesn't half, as I say, kind of empower you to feel more confident about those conversations. And it's definitely therefore enabled me to kind of talk convincingly as well with directors about it, because inevitably part of these conversations that you have with directors, you're constantly challenging each other, and if somebody is coming from a place of sort of fear and ignorance, sometimes there can be those barriers that you just have to carefully kind of tap away at, or that guard, that sort of like, I don't want to do it, I don't know how to do it kind of thing. So definitely it's made for a much more inclusive casting process where in terms of the shows I've worked on.
And so on that note, what would be your tips? So for people watching at home that might want to start considering, theatre makers, people who run venues, directors doing a new production, are there any tips that you would say to those people who are maybe considering the idea of bringing in deaf and disabled actors? And I know we've had a conversation before about that consideration being earlier on so you get it in your budget.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts around that? And
yeah, certainly. Just wait. So yes, I think the key thing for me is time. Make sure that you're giving this enough time. I mean, I would say that for any casting process. So much of the time with these are afterthoughts. We're coming too late to conversations, really, for it to be anything other than really quite hectic and quite stressful for sort of everybody involved, not least the actor who needs that preparation time. I mean, every actor needs that prep time, but some actors need quite specific are doing quite specific preparatory work and need a little bit longer, disputably. But I think, yes, in terms of bringing in a casting director sooner so that you can have these conversations at the inception of a project. I worked on something recently where when I came to it, it was a new piece of writing, and it had like 2 years of being developed, and R&Ds and workshops and sharings. And so the script that we had at audition was like draft 10 or something. And when we were having the conversation about bringing people in, there was about 10 people in the company. We decided to see people for all of the characters. And we met with an actor who chose not to use his voice and was BSL user, and he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant, and the director and the writer loved him and were really excited by what he was doing. But because that character had been written with a voice, you know, he uses his voice, that character, and he had done for 2 years of kind of being written. It was too big a shift. It was too big a change. They were there saying, oh, you know, I want to write another character. So it's great. It's inspiring, you know, it's inspiring people to go away and go, oh, you know, why didn't I write that guy in the first place? The guy who's a BSL user. Why didn't I write that character in? But, you know, as I was saying at the beginning of this, as a casting director, you're there to provoke, and you're there to challenge, and you're there to say things like, you know, I know this actor who I think would be brilliant in this role. He chooses not to use his voice. He's a BSL user. Let's bring him into one of these R&Ds. Let's bring him in earlier. Let's bring him in sooner, so that we can kind of make this as creative and exciting a thing as we're supposed to be doing in this industry. You know, that's what we do. So yes, so please bring in a casting director sooner to have these conversations. And in terms of time, you know, make sure there is enough time, not least, as I say, for preparation, but in the room as well. You know, let's not rush through these auditions all the time. Let's get to know each other. This isn't just about you presenting as an actor what you have to show us. This is about you getting to know us getting to know you, and kind of it being more of a sharing, collaborative thing. And make sure that there's time as well, if you are doing recalls or you're doing kind of chemistry reads as well, that there's time enough to do that, where you're not worried about losing everybody, as I say, to other projects. You know, I think quite a lot of the time, I mean, theatre, for the most part, we are the poor relative. We are, you know, we're there waiting for you to not get the telly job and not get the film, you know. So I think just, I don't, you know, so we should never really be waiting on that. Do you know what I mean? And these things can happen really quite last minute, that by their very nature, they change a lot in terms of dates. Let's work out our own sort of ideal block of casting that falls in a good amount of time before day one of rehearsals. And, you know, let's not stress people out by rushing things. If you don't have the money in your budget as well to ensure that you can kind of cover all possible access requirements that might come up, and if you therefore are asking a performer to apply for access to work funding, then you have to give that time. I mean, that's a headache. That is a headache, and it takes time. And until that person has submitted that application and has got the approval, you don't know if that person can be in your production. So time is a really, really key one. And in terms of budget, yes, make sure that you know, you're looking at that carefully. In terms of any interpreters is the obvious one that you might need, and that's interpreters in auditions, of course, as well as in the rehearsal room. And it's never just one. You know, so it's just stuff like that, that just be mindful of what this might become, so that you can allow it to become something, so that you're not hemmed in. You know, I think a really, really key thing is all of these things that are restricting us, it's assumptions that are being made, it's unconscious biases that we're not looking at, that we're not scrutinizing. Don't underestimate your audience as well. Don't assume that you know exactly what it is that they need from you. You know, we're a creative industry. And a practical thing as well, kind of have a list of accessible venues and a list of interpreters, and interpreters who work in theatre as well is a really, really key thing.
Brilliant. Thank you. That is so much useful tips and insights that I really think that people could really take away and use. That's brilliant. And I would also add, to those of people who aren't necessarily familiar with the Arts Council process, that if you're doing a production and you know that you want to bring in deaf and disabled actors, you can put access as part of the budget but separate to the budget. So when you're applying through Arts Council, it doesn't have to come out, if your production costs X thousands of pounds to make, you don't have to find the access money out of that budget. The Arts Council will fund the access separate. And it's a really important thing to remember, because if you have thought of it already, then you're not going to get caught out budget later.
Absolutely, and that just makes me think in terms of research and kind of literature and stuff. That's the other thing, that there's so much out there, and I hope that I don't come across as preachy, because I'm in no position to be, but I'm just speaking from a point of which I have come to this from I mean, fear and ignorance, I guess, as back in, when I started working on ramps. And I think it's constantly looking to find out more. The reason why we have that fear and ignorance is because we don't have contact with conversation around disability. And there is so much, I've been listening to the podcast that Disability Online and Grey Eye Presents have been doing. They're brilliant. I would highly recommend them. There's Alim's Alim and Equity Indefinitely Theatre have put together BSL Best Practice Guide. Birds of Paradise have been doing webinars online during the pandemic about accessibility in theatre. There's Crypt Tales. There's Melissa Johns wrote a lovely, a brilliant, insightful piece. What would Frida do on BBC iPlayer? There's Crypts Without Constraints.
Sorry, Polly, I just missed the last name. Apologies, the last name.
Melissa Johns.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm racing, but it's just to say that there's just so much out there, and I think just keep connecting with this conversation. It's something that we must be collaborative on, and we need to find a space of solidarity in which we can really thrash this out together and move this forward positively and productively.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. And we will make sure that we put links to a lot of those things in the comments so that people can find them again. We are, my God, we could have talked and talked for hours, both of us probably independently of each other. But we need to start wrapping it up. I've got some final quick fire questions for you.
Oh God, right, okay.
Don't get nervous, it's all very innocent. So I'm going to give you options and you just give me a quick fire answer.
Lord, hate quick fire, but go.
They're very, very simple. Okay, theatre or film?
Oh, theatre.
Obs. Costume or set?
Costume.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Good answer. Cat or dog?
Cat.
Oh,
sorry, Claire. Yes, sorry, not very diplomatic.
Seascape or mountainscape?
Oh, seascape.
Classic play or modern play?
Modern play.
Stage fighting or dancing?
Dancing.
Here's one from the olden days when you could go out. Pub or restaurant?
Pub.
Okay, and now we've been asking everyone. Well, actually, firstly, I'm going to ask you your favourite audition venue.
Favourite audition venue? Oh yes. So it would have to be Regent's Park, I think, just simply because they've now got a whole snazzy load of studios, but we used to audition in the sort of it's like a little cabin almost thing. It's actually their green room, and what's lovely about it is it's just that sort of. Normally we'd be casting in the autumn for the spring and summer season, and just sort of slipping about on the autumn leaves on the way down to the wooden cabin, and then coming out and backstage, and just that stage is quite special. So that, yeah.
The romance.
Yeah.
And do you have, again, we're asking everyone, of course, because it's the green room, and I don't know how much you get to hang out in green rooms as a casting director, but do you have a favourite green room?
Well, yes. I mean, we don't. Well, I don't hang out much in green rooms, but I was at the Royal Exchange for 5 years. So really, I suppose that is the only green room that I kind of know very well. But it was a very special one. In any case, it was lovely. The women who worked there were wonderful. So yeah, there.
It's always about the people, I think.
Yeah.
Whether you can get a good cup of tea.
Yeah.
Well, wow, thank you. It's been such a great and inspiring conversation. And as I say, we could go on for hours, I'm sure. But I must just say a massive thank you to everyone that's joined us on the Green Room today. A big thank you to Anna and Tracey for providing the access today. A big thank you to the production team behind the scenes that have made it all possible. For DH and Hot Coals to come together to make this series. Thank you to you, Polly, for giving up your time this morning.
Not at all. Thank you, Claire. It's been lovely to chat.
Thank you. It has been lovely to chat. And if only all my working days could be this. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And do join in the conversation. Use the hashtag #thegreenroom_UK. I think I've got that right. Put us some comments in the comments, hit the like, hit the subscribe so that you can join us next week in the Green Room. And thank you. We will see you soon. Thanks very much.
Guest Polly Jerrold. Host Clare-Louise English. Interpreters Anna Kitson and Tracey Tyer. Music Road Trips off Shane. The Green Room. A video podcast produced by Strive, a collective made up of the DH Ensemble and Hot Coals Productions. You can find all the videos and audio recordings of this series at www.strivecollective.org/the-green-room. Twitter @Strive Collective with no E. #thegreenroom_UK. Celebrating best practice, spotlighting unsung heroes, inspiring action. Logos for Strive, Hot Coals Productions and the DH Ensemble, supported using public funding by Arts Council England.